July 2025, a ceremony took place on a hillside in Samaria, Israel, that most of the world's media completely ignored. 5 red heifers, raised in Texas, specifically for this purpose, flown to Israel under rabbinical supervision, were brought before a gathering of Jewish priests. A purification ritual was conducted using their ashes, a ritual that had not been performed in over 2,000 years, and according to the Bible, it is the one ritual that must happen before the third temple can be built. The temple that every major end times prophecy in both the Old and New Testament says must stand before the return of the Messiah. This is not a theory. This is not speculation. This is happening right now, in 2026. The third temple. For most people, those words sound like religion, like prophecy, like something far away and theoretical. But in 2026, the third temple is no longer theoretical. The blueprints exist. The priestly garments have been recreated, including the high priest's breastplate with 12 gemstones, handcrafted at a cost of millions of dollars. A solid gold menorah worth over $2 million is already built and waiting. The Temple Institute in Jerusalem has been preparing for this moment for decades. And now, for the first time since the Romans destroyed the Second Temple in 70 AD, the purification requirements are being fulfilled. In the next 16 minutes, we are going to cover what the third temple is and why the Bible says it must be built. What is actually happening in Israel right now in 2026? The one obstacle that stands between the current moment and construction beginning. Why the building of this temple would be the most politically explosive event in human history. And what both Jewish and Christian prophecies say happens immediately after it is built. Stay until the end, because the final prophecy is the one that changes everything. To understand why the third temple matters, you need to understand what came before it. The first temple was built by King Solomon around 957 BC on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It housed the Ark of the Covenant, the physical dwelling place of God that we covered in a previous video. It stood for nearly 400 years before Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian army destroyed it in 586 BC. The second temple was built after the Jewish return from exile. Completed around 516 BC, it was later expanded by King Herod into one of the most magnificent structures in the ancient world. Jesus walked in this temple, and then, in 70 AD, the Roman general Titus razed it to the ground, every stone thrown down, just as Jesus had predicted in Matthew 24:2. And since that day, for nearly 2,000 years, there has been no Jewish temple in Jerusalem. But the prophets said it would not always be this way. The prophet Ezekiel, writing in exile in Babylon around 571 BC, received a detailed vision of a future temple. It includes precise measurements, architectural specifications, and descriptions of worship practices that have never yet taken place. This vision spans 4 entire chapters, Ezekiel 40 through 43. It is not a metaphor. It reads like a blueprint. At the climax of the vision, in Ezekiel 43:4, the glory of God, the same presence that filled Solomon's temple, returned. The glory of the Lord entered the temple through the gate facing east. That event has not happened yet, which means, according to Ezekiel, it is still coming. And the New Testament goes even further. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, Paul describes a figure he calls the man of lawlessness. He will enter the temple of God and declare himself to be God. This event is placed immediately before the return of Jesus. In Matthew 24, Jesus himself references the prophet Daniel and speaks of an abomination standing in the holy place. In Revelation 11:1-2, John is told to measure the temple in Jerusalem. All of these prophecies assume that a third temple exists. They are describing something that has not yet happened. Something that, in 2026, may be closer than at any point in the last 2,000 years. Let us talk about what is actually happening on the ground right now. The Temple Institute is a Jewish organization based in Jerusalem that has been preparing for the third temple since 1987, have already recreated over 70 sacred temple vessels, all built to exact biblical specifications, using only materials permitted under Jewish law: the solid gold menorah, the silver trumpets, the priestly garments for over 600 priests, the high priest's breastplate with 12 gemstones representing the 12 tribes of Israel, the altar of incense, the laver, the bronze washing basin. Everything is ready. Everything except one thing. That one thing is the red heifer. According to Numbers chapter 19, before any temple service can begin, the priests and the temple grounds must be purified, and the purification requires the ashes of a perfect red heifer. A cow that is entirely red, has never been yoked, and has never had a blemish. The Talmud records that only 9 red heifers were used throughout the entire period of the first and second temples. The 10th, according to Jewish tradition, will be used by the Messiah himself. In 2022, 5 red heifer candidates were born on a ranch in Texas, raised under rabbinical supervision, and flown to Israel. In July 2025, a purification ceremony using their ashes was conducted in Samaria. The first such ceremony in over 2,000 years. This is not symbolic preparation. This is the beginning of the actual process. And there is more. In March 2026, Israeli archaeologists reopened the ancient pilgrimage road in Jerusalem, the road that Jewish pilgrims walked for centuries to ascend to the Temple Mount. This road, buried for nearly 2,000 years, now runs from the Pool of Siloam directly to the Temple Mount. It was not reopened for tourism. It was reopened because the City of David Archaeological Project wanted to restore the path. But for prophecy watchers, the symbolism is impossible to ignore. The road to the temple is now open again. There is also an active movement in Israel training young Jewish men in the priestly duties. Described in the Torah, the Priestly Training Institute teaches temple service, how to perform sacrifices, how to maintain the altar. These are not theoretical classes. These are men preparing to actually serve in a functioning temple. Israeli politicians have publicly stated their support for Jewish prayer rites on the Temple Mount. In recent years, the number of Jewish worshippers permitted to ascend the Temple Mount has increased dramatically. So if everything is ready, the vessels, the garments, the priests, the purification rites, what is stopping it? One thing. The Dome of the Rock, built in 691 AD by the Umayyad Caliph Ebedi. The Dome of the Rock sits directly on the Temple Mount, on the very site where both the first and second temples stood. It is Islam's third holiest site. Any attempt to remove or damage it would trigger an immediate international crisis of catastrophic proportions. The Temple Mount is administered by the Wukaf, an Islamic religious authority under a complex arrangement with Israel. Jews are permitted to visit, but not to pray there. The political situation is so volatile that a single wrong step could ignite a regional war. But here's a theory that has gained serious traction among biblical scholars in recent years, and it changes everything. What if the third temple does not need to be built on the exact spot of the Dome of the Rock? Researcher Dr. Asher Kaufman proposed in the 1980s that the Holy of Holies was located slightly north of the Dome of the Rock, in an area currently occupied only by a small Islamic prayer structure called the Dome of the Tablets. Under this theory, there is enough space on the Temple Mount for both a new Jewish temple and the Dome of the Rock to coexist. It is a controversial theory, but it is not a fringe one. And it explains a detail in Revelation 11:2 that has always puzzled scholars, where John is told to leave the outer court unmeasured, because it has been given to the Gentiles. The political dimension of all of this cannot be overstated. Jerusalem is the most contested city on earth. The Temple Mount is the most contested piece of real estate in human history. 3 of the world's largest religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all have profound claims to this location. Any significant change to the status quo on the Temple Mount would have immediate and global consequences, which is why what is happening in 2026 is so significant. Not because the temple is being built tomorrow, but because for the first time in 2,000 years, all of the preconditions are converging simultaneously, and the world is not paying attention. Now let us talk about what both Jewish and Christian prophecies say happens after the third temple is built, because this is the part that makes the current moment so extraordinarily significant. According to the sequence described in Daniel, Matthew, and Revelation, the building of the third temple is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a final chapter. The temple is built. Temple service resumes daily sacrifices, priestly rituals, all the practices described in the Torah. And then, at the midpoint of the tribulation period, Something happens inside that temple that Daniel called the abomination of desolation. Jesus referenced Daniel's abomination of desolation in Matthew 24-15. He said, "So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination, that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel. Let the reader understand." Daniel 9:12 described this as a figure who stops the temple sacrifices and sets up something detestable in the holy place. Paul, in 2 Thessalonians 2, says this figure will proclaim himself to be God in the temple of God. This is the event that triggers the final sequence, the Great Tribulation, the Battle of Armageddon, and the return of Jesus Christ. Now, Jewish understanding of these prophecies differs significantly. In Jewish eschatology, the third temple is built before or by the Messiah. Its construction signals the beginning of the Messianic age, the return of the Shekinah glory. The divine presence is the culmination of Jewish history. The ingathering of all Jewish exiles, the resurrection of the dead, and the establishment of God's kingdom on earth follow. Both traditions, with different theological frameworks, point to the same location at the same time as the epicenter of history's final chapter: Jerusalem, the Temple Mount. Now, let us bring all of this together. The third temple is not a distant prophecy. In 2026, every preparatory element that Jewish law requires is either complete or actively underway. The temple vessels are built. The priestly garments are ready. Priests are being trained. The pilgrimage road is open, and a purification ceremony using red heifer ashes, the first in 2,000 years, was conducted in July 2025. The only thing separating the current moment from the beginning of temple construction is the political reality of the Temple Mount. And political realities in the Middle East, as history shows, can change overnight. Here is what I want to leave you with. Every major civilization in history has had its moment when prophecy and current events became close. We appear to be living in one of those moments right now. Whether you read this through a Jewish lens, a Christian lens, or simply as a student of history, the convergence of events is extraordinary. The road is open. The priests are trained. The vessels are ready. The purification has begun, and a 2,000-year-old promise is moving slowly, undeniably, toward its fulfillment. If this video opened your eyes to something you had never seen before, share it. Because the mainstream media is not covering what is happening in Jerusalem right now, and the people in your life deserve to know. Subscribe to The Ancient Verdict if you are not already, because every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday we go deeper into buried truths. Next video, we reveal the real Satan, not the medieval caricature you were taught, but the original biblical figure. Leave in the comments, do you believe the third temple will be built in your lifetime? I read every single comment. See you next video.